at Newcastle University, and I'm also the Newcastle University lead for UNI-Health, which is the funder for this project, for the setup of this project. So what I'll try to do is really go through some of the things that I go through in my job normally. My job has two roles really. On one hand, it's explaining to innovators and entrepreneurs why they should engage with ageing, why we need their help to innovate around ageing. And the second part of it is generally around trying to organise projects and activities to make sure that something is done within some of these spaces. So I'll talk to you a bit about why we're even thinking about ageing, why we need to innovate as well. I'll give you some examples of innovations and interventions. They're not all in your space, but it gives you an idea of some of the things that are going on. And then we'll talk about a few issues to think about if you're trying to innovate for an ageing society. So this is why we're thinking about ageing, and that's because for most of the last 200 years there's been a steady increase in longevity. A fantastic triumph, mostly driven by people like yourselves, people who are space makers, so civil engineers, architects, other engineers who've made places safer, more hygienic, and better places to live, made better food available, all those sorts of things, all things that we associate with cities and places. So this hasn't been a medical thing, although towards the later end of it, it's been more so. This has been all about the quality of the places where we live and work. And that has driven this phenomenal increase of approximately 5 hours of increased longevity every day for the past nearly 200 years. Now when we talk about ageing, people push back and say, well, people are always ageing, so what's all this ageing society nonsense? What does it really mean? There have always been old people, what's it really all about? And I suppose if you look at the beginning of that curve that I've just shown, progression through stages of life was like the top line there. People were lucky to get out of their 20s. Lots of people died as very small children, or they were killed or injured as they started their working lives and were working in very difficult and dangerous situations without any training. So all of these sort of hazardous things thinned out our population quite regularly as we went through, until, whilst there were older people, actually the numbers of people over 60 were very small. There were still people who were in their 80 to 100, but they were tiny, tiny numbers. So tiny that even quite recently some of the UK statistics stop at about 85 and don't actually show the little triangle on the top. So when they then show later, it doesn't show how much it's grown. What's happening now is we're sweeping through our early lives quite satisfactorily with very little loss to our population up until about the age of 60. Then some of the longer term conditions start to bite. People start to have challenges, and some people are unfortunate enough to die of things like cancer and things which we still have some challenges for, but still a very significant number of people now are getting all the way through their lives and getting through to be 80 plus, and that's where we're seeing this real growth in the population. And very soon we'll see the situation where probably half of them, in fact probably we're about there now, half of the people born today have a very good chance of living all the way through to at least 100. So that's going to continue to change the way that society looks. And these are Spanish diagrams. I managed to track some down. And you can see how we've gone from a situation where in 1975 we had this almost sort of theoretical shape of almost a triangle, give or take a couple of wars and things, that had shaped the population, but almost a triangle with lots of people, young people at the bottom, and a few older people at the top needing support. And now you can see that combined with this thrust of people staying alive longer, but also reductions in fertility, which has meant there are fewer children, we've got this situation with a much wider head on that graph. You can see how the population is sort of above 80 is growing significantly, and other ages below that actually too, whilst very many fewer children and people coming up through early working life in order to support that. And that is reflected in this, which is the median age of the population. So when I was born, the median age of the population in Spain was about 30 years old. So there are as many people under 30 as there were over 30. Now we're getting up close to the 50 mark. So we're now talking about very many more people over 50 than there have ever been before. And that's really what it's all about. It does mean that there are large numbers of the oldest old, which is the fastest growing segment of the population. It does come with the problems that we see written large in the newspaper and that everyone gets very excited and very concerned about. And that does come with an increased incidence of disability and comorbidity and care needs, which everyone also gets very exercised about, because we're wondering how we're going to cope with this, where is the money going to come from, all of these things. But that isn't the whole story. When you actually look at the things that people perceive happening to them when they age, and the challenges that they see, you can see there's a whole range of physical changes that they see, including weight problems, problems with sleep, all sorts of things there that are kind of, they're not disabling as such, though they might be if you get enough of them at once, but they are things that make life difficult. Pain, for example, loss of strength, slowing down, all those sorts of things. Things that just make it a little bit more difficult to navigate your way through a society that was actually designed for people who are that much younger, who don't have these problems. And so what we really see is a society which has much greater diversity and inequality than we used to. So we've designed the society for a population that was 50% under 30, and we could forget about the numbers over 70 because they were so small. And we designed the society for that. And now we've got a society where the median age is 50. There are lots of those people in the older box, so we can't ignore them anymore. But overall, that means there's more diversity, more inequality in the population. A need for more choice, perhaps, a need for more different solutions for people. Less reliance on a rule of thumb that works pretty well, because it doesn't work very well anymore. And there are these much higher levels of these low-grade functional challenges or decline, where people have got niggles. I have to carry my glasses everywhere I go, otherwise I can't read the instructions on things or read what's in food or pills or whatever. And that's happened in the last 3 years, much to my disgust. But we've all got some of these things going on, and as people get into even their 40s, but in their 50s and 60s, they see more of these. But it's not enough to make them disabled, so the disability rules and the provision we make for disabled people can actually be a challenge in itself. So people have talked about the fact that they've got this arthritis pain and they find it a bit difficult to get around and they get very easily tired, but they've got to walk past rows and rows and rows of disabled parking spaces to get into the supermarket, because we've made provision for those people with really substantial need, but it's actually making it difficult for people with lesser needs because we haven't considered that. So what we're really trying to do is to create a thriving and sustainable communities with this much higher median age than previously, in which people of all ages can maximise their opportunities and their well-being, and which minimise the impacts of social inequality. And that's very similar to the things that you heard earlier on today from Thomas about what the age-friendly scheme is saying, its targets are, what is age-friendliness. It's very much about this sort of thing, a society that works for everybody, not just more projects for older people. Though they are definitely needed. The UK government does this thing periodically called Foresight, and it's done one fairly recently on ageing. And I don't expect you to be able to read it all, but you can see here that these nice NHS blue ones are the health ones, so the green ones are about working life. The orange ones are the ones that you might think would definitely be important to you because they're about spaces and work. But actually, when you read the texts in those, you realise how they're all so entangled that because of the way that the determinants of health work, there's a role in what you do in probably 50% of those blobs. So it's just about concentrating on the stuff that's involved in your discipline. but actually this whole picture needs to be dealt with. And this challenge now has global recognition very seriously. The WHO has its healthy ageing and age-friendly city programs. The US National Institute for Aging is very well funded to try and provide solutions for ageing in the US, and that's driven by a really strong retired people's group, the AARP, and a very strong veterans organisation, people who've retired from the military. In Europe, we've got EIT HEALTH, trying to drive innovation around lifelong health and active ageing. Horizon 2020 has elements of innovation in it, and a lot of work around ageing and health. EIPAHA, the European Innovation Partnership for Active and Healthy Ageing, has all sorts of stuff going on to bring together groups that are working in this sort of space. And in the UK, we've got the UK National Innovation Centre for Ageing, which has been partly funded by government to try to lead the way on this. There's another centre, the Centre for Ageing Better, which is more around policy in this sort of space and informing policy in this sort of space. And the UK has, as part of its industrial challenge, this industrial strategy, this idea of a UK global challenge on healthy ageing, where it sees itself as having a role in addressing this global challenge, not only for the sake of the well-being of the globe, but more for the sake of the fact that we could make a lot of money out of it if we get there first. And Spain is in a similar situation to us. We're not the oldest nations that are around. Japan's still up there as the oldest, but Europe has some of the older populations, and Spain and the UK are among some of those. So there is an opportunity and a need for us to respond to these things. So when we think about intervening in the way that people's lives change as they age, there's some thinking that puts us into sort of four stages. And these 4 stages are not equal by any means, but they do help us to think a little bit about the order in which we might try to do things and why. And in this case, the first stage has been defined as build reserve. It could equally be termed as maintain reserve, or as what we might think of as prevention. And this is what can we do to make sure that people get to their later lives in as good a condition as possible. So can we form habits when we're young, like exercise and healthy eating and all of those good things that mean that we're in a good state to start with as we reach our older age. And then if we do have challenges, are there things that we can do to restore capability that we've lost? Can we give people physiotherapy? Can we give them mental training if they're starting to have fear? What can we do to give them back capabilities that they're starting to lose? And it's very important that we try to do that, because once you start losing capability, it's a slightly slippery slope, and you tend to lose them step by step as you progress. If we can't reactivate, can we compensate? Can we give people tools? Can we give people assistive technologies, as we hear, or assisted living technologies, as we hear about? These are just tools for living. They just happen to be targeting a particular population. We all use tools all the time to do things that we can't do by ourselves, and this is just a specific set of tools, really, that we try to give people to compensate for the fact that they've lost a capability that the rest of us somehow still have. And then, only then, if we can't compensate, should we really be considering care. And care is about giving people the things that they need that they can't do even with tools. So it's about what services you can provide to somebody to help them, because they can't really look after themselves completely anymore. And we should only do that when we absolutely have to, because once we start to do that, we start to erode people's skill base, and we start to accelerate that decline quite significantly. So if you have, for example, an older loved one who can no longer shop for themselves, take them shopping. Don't do their shopping for them, because they keep some of that skill, they keep using some of that skill, and you just help them overcome some of the hurdles that might be along the way. And then underpinning that, we've got these positive messages about ageing well to help people to adopt the right behaviours because they understand what they should be doing. There's messages there about building good connections and maintaining them. How can we keep people connected as part of society and not see them as something other? And one of the problems that we have with older people in society is because they were very small numbers, they were treated as something separate, something different, something almost outside of normal mainstream society. The numbers are such that cannot continue very much longer. And it was never a very good idea in the first place. And then can we be clever enough that when people do start to decline, if they have something happen to them, for instance they go into hospital or something, can we make sure they come back fully recovered rather than just recovered enough to come back, which is a very different state of affairs. And if we are going to intervene, we need to be quite careful about to what level we intervene. And that means if you're going to provide technologies or support mechanisms or whatever, they need to be quite flexible. So for instance, this is a very simple example, a very physical example of somebody who's struggling to walk. The first thing we try to do is to give them a walking stick to help support their weight. If that's not enough, then ideally we give them 2 walking sticks, one for each hand, and that helps them to move more easily. Only if that starts to fail and they can't cope with that, should we think about giving them a walker or a rollator, as this I believe is termed in the UK. And then only then should they start tearing about on one of these things, because once you're in one of these, you're not practicing walking, you're not getting any physical exercise, and so you're accelerating those things. Not to mention the fact that your grandchildren will get hold of it and race up and down the street. Terror! So if we think about some of these things just as a way of thinking about some of the interventions or some of the innovations that we might want to think about. And we'll think about the building, and I'll make no apologies for the fact that building reserve and delaying loss has got loads in it here in this presentation, because there's so much more that you can do if you start doing things early. And they don't even have to be big things. This is a really interesting paper. All that they did in this paper as intervention was basically maintain properties properly. And maintaining people's properties properly stops people from having to go to hospital. So there was a significant reduction in the number of people going into hospital in properties that were properly maintained and had the little upgrades that you need, like upgrading the kitchen when it got worn out, things like that. So no one actually had to change anything to do that. They just had to think about making sure that properties were kept in good repair. Safe space is really important throughout life. If people don't perceive that the public spaces around them are safe, they don't let their children out to play. Their children don't form habits of exercising outside and moving around, and they start to form their relationships very much inwardly and thinking on being on the computer and things like that. If older people don't feel safe, then they don't go out, they don't get to walk, they don't meet people, they don't make connections. So it's very important that we have safe spaces, and plenty of them in our cities, in our communities, so that people will still engage with one another and also get the exercise that we all need, or at least the activity we all need. We don't really necessarily have to make it structured exercise. This is a very, very simple innovation. I think we've got 2 in the city now, haven't we? They've been in other places for a lot longer, but in Newcastle this is new. As you get older, you become A, bit more concerned about crossing the road, and B, it takes you a little bit longer. So in some places they've lengthened the time that traffic lights are set for people to cross. And alongside most of those where that's happened, they've also added in these counters so that people can see how long they've got and can see that they haven't arrived when the green light's actually halfway through and they're going to suddenly have cars coming from all directions. So it just helps people to carry on going about their daily business in the way that they've always done it, feeling safe and feeling comfortable. Not rocket science at all. This is always a good one, because you go to so many city centres and shopping centres and other places, and you see these wonderfully artistic pieces of seating, and the moment you sit on them, you slide straight off the end, or you can't get up again, or you find you're sat in some pool of water or something that's collected in the artistic shapes that have been formed. But we need these things. If one of the things that happens to people quite early on is they can't really walk more than 400 yards, then every 400 yards you need a seat. and if you have a seat every 400 yards or less, people will be able to carry on walking because they'll have somewhere to rest when they need to rest. This was a little bit of work that we did. We put in Newcastle, we put a designer together with a group of older people in the context of manufacturing a piece of street furniture. And they said they wanted to do a seat, and we've been making seats forever. They can't be anything new. Well, there was. There were about 20 new features that were in that bench that made it a little bit more age-friendly, a little bit more what older people wanted to see in a bench. Dealt with some of the issues that they found in other benches. Things like the arms on every seat so that you could get up easily, and those arms projecting forward so you can pull yourself up rather than having to lift yourself up, which is much more difficult. It was a bit higher, it was a bit more upright. Some people have complained about the height because their little legs swing in the air, so you can't win them all, but that was a design feature that people did want to see. No legs underneath so you can sweep out all the crisp packets and rubbish that collect under conventional seats. All things that were quite, not necessarily even about ageing, it was just having a nice place to sit. But the people that we put onto this exercise were older, they'd been around a bit longer, they'd sat on more seats, they had a bit more idea of what made a good seat and what didn't, and they came up with this very interesting thing that is not unpleasant to look at in any way. It's quite sculptural in itself, and is very effective to sit on. It's not a very happy place for skateboarders, it's a bit of a bumpy ride. And this is something that is probably new and emerging, but the idea that we may need to find our way around places in different ways depending on who we are and what our needs are. So we could build a whole community where it's really, really easy to get around and there's no stairs and it's all lifts and escalators and things and travelators. And older people who have trouble getting around will be able to get around really well. And the rest of us all would get very, very fat very quickly because we wouldn't have to. We're getting to the stage now where we have our cities very well monitored with cameras and things like this. And we can actually use machine learning and artificial intelligence to analyse some of those pictures. And we can actually tell from the way people move that they might have special needs in moving. Within the Urban Observatory in Newcastle, they're actually experimenting with this now. They're looking at photographs from the CCTV around the city, and they're trying to work out where there are some people who maybe are older and need more help. And then you could link that to screens, and as people walk up to the screens, you could give them a different story of how to get somewhere. Maybe then you're giving them all the rest of the public. So you could start to personalise. There are issues around using data in this way, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but it's something which is starting to emerge in this understanding of who is who and what help they might need. Another thing that's changed in our spaces is that there are more generations using stuff. So in the past we might have seen 3 generations in a space. Now we're talking about 4, maybe even 5. So we have children, small children perhaps, needing to be looked after and kept secure. We've got very, very old people trying to move around the space and needing perhaps to be protected from people tearing through on their bicycles or their stolen mobility scooters. And then we've got all the rest of us trying to go about our business too. And if we think about the fact that we're going to have those 4 or 5 generations moving around in space, we will design it differently. And we'll also find things that we can do that are not stigmatising because they're not just about a generation, not just about oldness. So we've particularly focused on kitchens and this in Newcastle, but people talk about the fact that older people sometimes have problems reaching high spaces. Well, short people have difficulty reaching high spaces too, and there are quite a lot of people that are a lot shorter than me. And our kitchens don't necessarily suit those. We've just decided to live with it, but actually it's not a very good design to do so. Older people might find it difficult to reach so far, but then if you're a woman and you're pregnant, you find it quite difficult to reach very far as well, because you've got this big bump in the way. So what's the point of designing something that you've got to reach like that to get to? You're just defeating the object and making it difficult for people, but we do. So if we start to think about how these different people have different needs, we start to design better. and simply designing better spaces mean that they are more suitable for a wider variety of people. They're more inclusive. They deal with more of these little challenges that people have. It just means more awareness. One of the things that we're seeing an awful lot of is these things. So there's a whole industry now of Fitbits and fitness apps or movement apps, all sorts of things. Lots of these sorts of health activity monitoring things built into insurance companies now. So insurance companies may give you a lower premium, the health insurance company, if you are active, if you follow particular exercise regimes or what have you. And people are generally quite interested in this, and they find it a motivator. They find it easier to go for a walk, knowing that actually they can count their steps. And I'm very reluctant to go anywhere without mine on, because if I walk somewhere I haven't counted the steps, I get really annoyed. So it is something that changes our behaviour subtly and helps us to do the right things. But it does mean we've got to have digital event, we've got to have Wi-Fi available to us, and we've got to have our smartphones and things around. And that's not necessarily yet ubiquitous. It's not something that everybody has yet moved into. We'll talk about that a bit later as well. This is some work from Newcastle, coming out of epidemiology and ageing, but actually being put into a very practical space. It shows you some of the ways in which people lose capability later on in their lives. And the message really is to try not to take this route where we come very quickly down the curve, and the bottom of the curve isn't actually death, it's actually the inability to look after yourself at all. So actually these people will probably live about the same length of time as each other. This person will need care for some years, and the other person will decline much later and more quickly, and have a much better quality of life on average as a result. To do that, we need to create the right sorts of interventions. We have to do those things in the right order. We have to restore people's capability, and we have to support them, and we have to only then give them care so that we're not accelerating that change. This is a wonderful paper where it highlights the importance of being able to reactivate people. This paper is actually somebody who broke their arm and then couldn't walk. A woman, she wasn't actually that old, I don't think. I can't remember all of the story. But she went into hospital. Before she went into the hospital, you can see she was spending probably, I don't know, 40% of her time walking around and being active and doing stuff. When she was in hospital, she was basically tied to the bed and not allowed to do anything. And when she came out home, she could only move around about 20% of the time. She was exhausted. She couldn't move around, she couldn't do all the things that she'd done before, just because she spent a couple of weeks in bed in hospital. And that would happen to any of us to some extent. And even for young men who are still being very physical, still building muscle, that is still something that would take time to recover from. Imagine an elderly woman or an elderly man who goes into hospital and is in the bed for 4 weeks. There's nothing physically wrong with them that means they can't walk about. It's just that because we are risk averse, we try not to let them do that in case they hurt the bits that are already hurt. And so we keep them in their bed. And then we have to try and give them back that capability that we've caused them to lose. So we just need to think about those sorts of things. And when we think about rehabilitation, we think about reactivating, we tend to think about this. And we have these, in our minds, these big, expensive rehabilitation centres with all single dancing kit, such as might be used for somebody who's lost a limb or something like that. But actually, these therabands and things are actually more than adequate for the task for most things that happen to most people, particularly people later in life. And there have been some very, very small but very interesting experiments done relating to the life curve thing that I showed you before, where people have tried this, and with 6 weeks of focused exercise using therabands, people have gone from being completely immobile. A lady in her 80s had gone from being completely immobile to feeling so well that she's invited her family to come to her for Christmas, and she will cater for them. Because it had just never been that focus on her physical ability until they did that 6 weeks work. And actually, it probably worked very well for her because she was a dancer, so her muscles probably had all the right memories, they just hadn't been practiced for a long time. But it gives us a hint that there's something there for all of us, and actually if we do these, if we create the right opportunities and the right behaviours, if we don't take people's abilities away from them by doing stuff for them, that we could really help people to live better for longer, which is what it's all about. And this is a step on the way. This is an innovation that's come out of Newcastle and Sheffield, a company that's based in Sheffield but has its research and development arm in Newcastle with the university. And they've created this app which people can use to get information about how to keep themselves active. They can get advice on exercises to do. And actually they've been quite clever with it too. So if you're one of the people who's using this app and you're linked to an organisation that is a sponsor, or for want of a better word, a partner in the app, then you can donate your data to that partner. So if it might be your local authority, it might be your local, your landlord, your housing association, whatever. If they're interested in your health, you can, and they're a partner in this, you can tell them what you're doing. They can see what exercise you're doing and they can help you. They can provide you some support. So it's quite a clever tool and using data quite cleverly. It's been quite well received in Scotland so far. England's a bit slower because we don't have to do things so much better than everybody else. But it is beginning to become more and more used where people are recognising that this is a challenge, that they can't just carry on doing the same old thing. And this is a sort of a different sort of rehabilitation really. This is around diabetes. And research from Newcastle has been very strong in identifying that type 2 diabetes can be reversed if you do it early enough and quickly enough. And this is an app-based tool with coaching built into it and all sorts of other things to support people to do just that, or to improve their diabetes if they can't actually get rid of it completely. It's called Changing Health. It's had some work very recently funded by EIT HEALTH over 3 years, working with insurance companies, and it's now being embodied into some insurance companies' policy and communication arrangements so that people can get a discount on their health policy if they have a diabetes risk or a diabetes diagnosis, and they use this app to manage the progression of their disease. And then, of course, the compensate. As it says, there is no shortage of technology. This is an interesting idea of an exoskeleton suit that can help people move around. The question is whether it's the right thing to do, and I suppose whether it's the right thing to do depends on what you can do for yourself. If this is a kind of a suit that you can kind of tweak, and you can use it to work against it, so it's helping you to exercise, or you can use it to just support you enough so that you do most of the work, but the suit just helps you on the way, then it's probably a great thing. If it's so powerful that it starts to do the work for you, it's just going to accelerate the wasting of your own muscles. It's on the market, it's not been hugely taken up so far, but it does show the power of some of the new wearables and sort of associated applications. And of course, this is back to the mobility scooters, and you can compensate by giving people a mobility scooter, but if the environment's totally unsuitable for it, if the person who uses that scooter lives in the place where you guys all went out to do your study, and they've got to ride it down the middle of the road because the pavements are covered in cars and trucks, or if like this, they've got to get up and down curbs to get across the road in the middle of London, then it's not really very much help to anybody, and it's not really doing its job. So that just highlights the fact that actually, even if you want to do these sorts of things, the environment, the stuff that you guys shape, the stuff that you guys think about all the time has to be right, has to be suitable for these things to be put in place. And then finally, care. This is quite complicated and messy slide. We tend to think about this a lot, the care home, where we put everybody that we really can't cope with anymore. It's become increasingly unfashionable in the UK to the stage where it's almost outlawed, because we've decided that everyone now must live in their own home regardless of what they want. And there's probably a balance there somewhere. There are probably some people who do perfectly well in the right sort of care home environment. This is a rather more progressive model where students share a care home with other people, and it creates a conversation, it creates an exchange of capabilities between the two age groups, and the students help out the other people, and the other people give advice and guidance and things that they can provide for the students. So an interesting model. Most people actually are here, aging in their own homes as best they can with a little bit of support. Not necessarily somebody with a nice blue uniform who comes in a very formal way. It may be the daughter or the daughter-in-law. It's probably one or the other. It's probably not going to be any men, because we tend not to. We'll come and change the plugs and stuff and the light bulbs, but that care stuff is a bit scary. And I have to say, having had to take my mother-in-law into the shower when she had huge amounts of dementia, I could quite see why we avoided it. It was not a pleasant experience. It was not something I ever imagined I would ever have to do, is take a shower with my mother-in-law. Really not what you want to be doing, but sometimes it's necessary. Here, one of the things that people worry about as they're getting older and they're living in their own homes is their ability to care for those homes. And if you can't care for your home and it becomes unkempt, you can become something of a target. It indicates that you're vulnerable. It attracts people. Gives people an excuse to come and knock on your door and say, I'll do your hedge for you, or I'll come and do your painting, or if you'd like to let me in, I'll come and wash the inside windows for you and rummage through your drawer and find your money at the same time, probably. So people don't want that. So if we can provide services that give people a little bit of help, that can do those services for people, it can make it much easier for them to feel safe at home in their place where they really want to be. And then the last one is one that I really struggle with. I don't want to be looked after by a robot when I get older. The Japanese think it's fantastic. And they probably need to, because they have no young people. Or very, very few. Their support ratio is completely off the map. Loads and loads of older people and much smaller numbers of younger people. But it's not the way I really see my life going forward, or want my life to go forward, and I suspect that many of you feel the same way. So what we have to do is try to make sure that we understand what people want to have done by people, what people are happy to have done by tools, robots, whatever, and make sure that we allocate those and innovate those in the right sort of way. And to do that, we have to talk to and be and feel what those people feel, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. So now I'll talk about some of the issues that you need to think about when you're thinking about innovations, you're thinking about things that you would like to do differently in your community, or things that you think would be useful to change your communities. You've heard a lot today about inequalities, and you've even seen this, I think you used this already, haven't you? So this came from actually a simulation that we did in Newcastle, where we tried to help people to understand how complicated this healthy life expectancy stuff was, and how people who thought it was all about health services started to understand actually this was about housing. This was about the fact that people who had poor housing might be mentally ill or depressed because they had poor housing or no work, as well as perhaps they might have physical problems because the houses were damp and they were having problems with breathing and stuff like this. So it's really complicated, and that the solution might be a bus as much as it might be a new house. There's all these things that need to be taken into consideration, and we got people together to play a sort of war game which helped them to understand that. The map just indicates this difference that you've had people talk to you about already, between poorer areas like Byker and the richer areas like Pontoon and South, which are not very far away from each other, but have very different backgrounds, very different populations. But everywhere has a map like this, as Thomas said earlier. This could be between the north and south of the country, the east and west of the country, different parts of Europe, different cities, different parts of cities, different parts of neighbourhoods even, it can be used. and to illustrate that. One of the things we did do with this was take it out into the community. When we did it at a big scale for professionals and people like that, we brought some observers in who were proper citizens, proper older citizens, and they got quite cross because they didn't want all these professional people sitting around making decisions about them, supported by these academics who thought they knew better than everybody else, and they wanted to be driving it. So we took it out into a couple of communities, and we gave people the opportunity to work with the simulation to understand some of these things and to get involved in suggesting ideas for their community. And we got some interesting results, I think. So one community set up walks, and these were sort of guided walks with a map. But that map took you to all the places in the area which had useful stuff, so information centres or places where you could access services. Places that people needed to go and needed to know where they were. Another area got really exercised about the large numbers of takeaway outlets in their area, and they started to intervene by persuading the fish and chip shops, because everybody in the UK eats fish and chips, to put fewer number of holes in the top of their salt shakers, so people would still shake it the same amount, but they'd get less salt. And they didn't notice, because they just shook it a habitual number of times and they net it, so they were just getting salt they didn't need or even realise they had. So this very, very simple mechanism was cutting down people's salt intake. They did try to go further with some of these things, and some of those things worked, some of them didn't. But they were real grassroots efforts from people who understood their communities and felt they understood what to do to change the behaviour in their communities. So that was an interesting thing. But what I wanted to say in issues is, if you are designing things which are getting to people through the market, things that they will have to pay for in order to make them healthier or to stay healthier longer, then you are going to open up that divide. So be very careful in thinking about innovation, about how it's going to be delivered. And I was really, really happy last week to be approached by an organisation who is setting up a fund for social innovation as opposed to investment in companies. And they want to, they'll run in parallel, so we already have people who are setting up funds to invest in companies that are going to deliver these things. But if we do it that way, those companies need to make a profit, people need to pay for it, they need to be able to afford it, and the people who can afford it will be the people who are already aging better. So they will get better, and the people will stay where they are or decline. This investment fund that I was talking to, they're targeting the other end. They're trying to find ways that they can fund different business models or charitable activity or transfer of responsibility between different organisations so that the impact can be felt amongst the people that most need it. That will start to bring that back together. Digital. Everybody knows that the innovation is about digital, because that's what everybody expects. Bolt a computer to it, that's innovation, that's innovative. Is it heck? But if you do go down that way, we do need to remember that there is a digital inequality. Not everybody is digitally able or digitally educated, but there are other inequalities as well. So we mentioned Byker. Byker is an estate on the edge of the centre of Newcastle, which is very deprived area. And they recently did some analysis about digital usage, and they found that only 70% of people on that site use the internet at all. And of those 70%, most of them were accessing it in the most expensive possible way, i.e. they were accessing it on time-limited packages on their mobile phones, their smartphones. It couldn't be more expensive for them to operate. They use tiny amounts of data. They might get a few Facebook messages between friends, and that's probably about as far as they had enough data to do. The other 30%, 50% of them didn't think that they even wanted to be anything to do with digital. They couldn't see the point. They saw it as something that was expensive and difficult to learn about, and that there was no reason to use it. So we're a long, long way from digital being ubiquitous. So if digital is the only answer that you've got to innovation, then you're going to miss a lot of the people that most need the help and support that you want to provide. It will come, we will get to the stage where the smartphone and digital stuff, hopefully, is as ubiquitous as the landline was a few years ago. But it'll take a little while yet. Data is another issue. Data is another thing that is innovative, of course, just by definition. Everybody thinks if you're going to do something with data, it must be innovative. But I always found this cautionary sort of statement really interesting around data, because something I was listening to on the radio once. And if you have a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. And data is really easy to use to straighten things out, to make things efficient, to count things, and to treat things as though they're all the same. That's really easy to do with data. And we can make our cities really efficient, really sustainable even, but bloody horrible places to live if we're not careful. Because we treat everybody as though they're the same sets of needs, trying to achieve the same things. What we can do, if we're clever, is we can use data to unlock our understanding of the diversity in our society and start to address it. So if we're clever about our data understanding, and don't just bean count, but actually really think about what the data means and what data we can capture about what, then we can start to really understand what people are trying to achieve, why they're trying to achieve it, and then help them to do it. And last but not least, Barbara spoke a lot about this, but it is really important. You're all designers of one sort or another. Your reason for being here is because you want to shape the way that your societies work, the way that your spaces work, and that people's spaces work. That's all about design. Design is about understanding who you're working for, who you're designing for. But design is something which is done mainly by younger people, and they don't necessarily have the experience and knowledge to design good things for people older than themselves. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that older people know how to do this either, because actually a lot of the things that older people might want to do, they don't know they want to do. And that's why this is more difficult than simply getting a couple of older people to come and sit on your steering group. This is about finding ways that you can have an ongoing conversation with groups of older people about what they're trying to achieve, what they might want to achieve in the future. Bring younger people into it as well. Now, I'm not saying exclude younger people, I'm not saying this is all about older people, but what I'm saying is it's a lot easier to understand what younger people are doing if you're older than it is to understand older people if you're younger, because you've never been there. Most older people have been young, they've been foolish, they've been out doing things that they shouldn't have been doing, been lucky enough to not get caught or get caught, whatever, and learn from it. So what we're saying is find ways to involve people in depth and ideally in quite large numbers, because this variety that I've talked about before, one person isn't going to do it, two people isn't going to be representative of this vast difference. So you need reasonably large groups, you need involvement in depth, but you can do it all the way along, right from the beginning, from identifying what people want to do, what their needs are, how you might meet, how they might prefer to have them met even, which starts you off on your design road. And then when you're developing products or services, what they should look like, how the people should interact with them, all of those sorts of things. And then right down through, okay, now I've got this design, if I'm going to make it big and get it out there, how do you want to receive it? How do you want to interface with it? How do you want to buy it or have it built for you? And then right down to the end, to evaluation, where we actually get it out there in the workplace and actually use it and see if it works, and people can respond and tell you, did it work for me the way that you thought it was going to work? No one thought about the ways we were going to use these things. These have evolved. Somebody thought it would be a great idea to have a camera on a phone, and then the world went completely bananas. But it wasn't. No one sat down, even in Apple, and thought, if we do this, and all these people are going to rush up and do this with it and that with it and that. So there's this emergence of things, and there will be things that we stumble across that are good, and there'll be things that we stumble across that are really bad too. But if we can understand them and see them for what they are, then we can do something about it. So what I would say is if you're going to do any of this stuff in the future, when you are doing this stuff in the future, when you're working in cities and towns in the future and trying to design spaces and places, involve people, as many people as you can, in as much depth as you can, with as much conversation as you can, to understand how they fit across all of those aspects of what you're trying to achieve. And that's it from me. So over to Rose to put you more specifically in the space that you guys work in.